Welcome to the Friends with Money podcast, brought to you by Money Magazine, creating financial freedom for Australians since 1999.
Hi, welcome to the Friends with Money podcast. I'm the managing editor, Vanessa Walker. Now, our cover story in the July issue is on the nation's spare bedrooms, both as a possible solution to Australia's housing crisis and a way to bring in more money for homeowners, particularly retirees. I'm here with our journalist, Ryan Johnson, to get to the bottom of this thorny issue. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Vanessa. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty. Let's start with the housing crisis. Sum it up for us. What is the shortfall between people needing homes and the housing stock that Australia currently has?
Yeah, well, thanks, Vanessa. There are so many reasons for the housing crisis we're currently in. I suppose the big one is that property prices have just outpaced wages for decades, and that's just continuing to exacerbate the problem. But there are many other issues with the housing crisis and facets of the housing crisis. So there's delays in the building process, there's population growth, there's a lack of social housing. There's the fact that a lot of the demand is isolated to just a few cities across Australia. And some argue that some policy incentives like the big infamous negative gearing incentivize investors over at the expense of first home buyers. Ultimately, all of this just leads to a shortage of affordable housing and delays in building new ones. So really, to address this, I suppose Labor has set out a target of 1.2 million homes, to build 1.2 million homes by 2029. But the problem is that if they build at current rates, we could fall short of that number by 250,000 homes. So we may have a while to go before the housing crisis gets any better.
Right, 250,000 homes that we haven't built that we're going to need.
That's right.
So the usual mooted solution to this shortfall is to lever supply and demand. How does the government propose to do that?
Yeah, so when Labor won the recent federal election, they brought with it a host of different policy changes to do with housing. So on the supply front, there's the big one, the fact that they want to build 1.2 million homes. But there's also other measures, such as they want to build up the prefabrication industry, which we covered in an issue before. Also, they're just doing fresh incentives for the construction industry, for employers in the construction industry and apprentices. But there's also some on the demand side. So for buyers, there's the Help to Buy scheme, and that's got an $800 million boost. There's the first home guarantee, which was extended to allow 5% deposits with no lender's mortgage insurance, which is typically a big cost if you have to face that. But again, all these policies, whether they're good or bad, they just take time, and it takes time for them to flow through the system. And the fact is that the crisis is here right now.
So there is a housing supply channel that we may be overlooking. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, so recent ABS data shows that there's about 7.4 million homes that have more bedrooms than they need, and over 1 million of them have more than 3 spare bedrooms. In total, that's over 13 million spare bedrooms that are just sitting empty. And when we're looking at, I suppose, boosting supply and tempering demand, we have supply that's already there, an immediate source that's already built, already livable, and it's just sitting empty.
Okay, so let's get down to the people issue. Who owns these spare rooms? Where can they be found?
Yeah, so older Australians mostly. It's, I guess, the legacy of the Australian dream, that big 4x2 house on the corner block, close to schools, that's sold with the idea of a family in mind, for a growing family in mind. But as we all know, when the kids get older, that becomes the empty nest. More than 80% of Australians over 65 own their home, and 3/4 of those homes have 3 or more bedrooms. Of those, 84% aren't being used for housing. So that's just a huge resource. It's just crying out to be used and rented out.
So what does this cohort of people perceive as the barriers to renting out their spare rooms?
Well, emotions are probably the biggest one. Most Australians just aren't used to the idea of just having someone share their house. You don't want some weird person living with you, and you think of the dangers. Imagine if it's your parents, would you want some stranger living with them? So there are real concerns around safety, especially for older homeowners, but equally, there's other concerns about living alone in a big house. So many older Australians are asset rich, cash poor. They're also desperately lonely. 1/4 of them live in poverty. So if you can rent out a space safely and to friendly people who could help out around the house, it could help solve both of those problems.
Very true. Now, another fear of people, aside from having strangers in their home, is that they fear if they rent out a room, they'll get hit with capital gains tax when they sell their home. Is there some truth to this? And please take us through, what is capital gains tax?
Yeah, so capital gains tax is quite a confusing thing for most people to get their head around. But in its sense, even though many people may not realize this, that it's not a separate tax in itself. It's just an extension of your income tax. So really what it simply is a tax you pay on the profit if you sell something. It's like your home for more than you paid for it. But if it's your main home, you don't pay any capital gains tax at all. The difference is that if you start to rent out a part of your home, like a spare bedroom, you might lose part of that exemption. So there are a few important details when it comes to capital gains tax. And I'll jump in here and just say, I definitely recommend talking to your advisor about this because it gets very confusing and the devil truly is in the detail when it comes to tax. But there are a few important details. So you only pay capital gains tax on the part of the home you rented out. And plus, if you've owned it for more than 12 months, you get a 50% discount on that gain. So there are even situations where capital gains tax might not apply at all. So if it's a casual domestic arrangement, like a boarder and they share meals and you pay for the bills, the electricity bills or the gas bills that they might contribute to, there's usually no capital gains impact at all. But if the room is advertised, leased, and the tenant pays for their own groceries and bills, then that's counted as generating income. It's a commercial, a formal agreement, and that's where capital gains tax can start to apply. Saying that though, there are a lot of situations where homeowners can still come out ahead even when you sell and you get hit with that capital gains tax. I mean, you might get hit with a considerable amount, but you also need to keep in mind that it's a long-term gain in the sense that you've also just earned a steady rental income over the period you've owned it. And you can also claim some expenses along with that as well. So you get the benefit of, I suppose, having that investment, if you like. And yeah, often as I outline in the cover story, as I go and I crunch the numbers in the article, that extra money outweighs any tax you end up paying later.
All right, good to know. The takeaway really for people is that if you want to generate income, it's economically advantageous to set it up as a boarding situation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like a domestic arrangement, no capital gains tax, and yeah, you get the benefits as well as not paying any tax at the end of it.
Good one. Now, I know that with a lot of these older people over 65, they do worry about whether their income affects their pension. So let's dive into that. How does renting out a room affect a person's pension?
Yeah, so for many older Australians, that is their biggest fear, that earning income, even a small amount, will reduce their pension. So there's good reason for this. I mean, most types of income count in your income test, and that includes rental income, both commercially and whether or not it's just a domestic arrangement. So both of those situations, you end up getting counted towards your income test. But again, the rules are more nuanced than they appear. Income generated from domestic arrangements like boarders and lodgers are assessed at reduced rates for pensions. So even better, like if the boarder is a close family member, the rent may not be counted as income at all. And if there's a mortgage on your home still, interest payments can be partially offset by the rent that you get. So in the article, I also talked to an academic called Lyndall Bryant from Queensland University of Technology. And she's calling for changes to the work bonus scheme. Now, this scheme is basically to encourage pensioners to continue to work as they age, just to continue to keep their mind sharp, contribute. And basically that scheme allows them to continue to work, earn money without it affecting their pensions. Now, she wants that policy to be broadened out to include rental income to be considered as work. At the moment, it's not, but she's calling on the government for that change. And I suppose this would incentivize pensioners to rent out their home, their spare rooms even more.
All right, so some policy tweaks would work well in this situation.
Exactly right. And it's a small change, really. And it could definitely incentivize older people to rent out their spare bedrooms.
All right, great. Now, I believe you have a bonus inclusion about spare bedrooms for those seeking a mortgage with the Commonwealth Bank. Let's sign off on that good news.
Yeah, so the Commonwealth Bank, Australia's largest lender, has allowed border income to count towards a loan application. So importantly, this is income generated from domestic arrangements, like I was saying before, boarders, lodgers, your adult child. So the change could increase borrowing power by up to $50,000, opening the door for home buyers who might have fallen short of meeting the bank's requirements beforehand. Now, it is limited to only one room per property, and it's $150 per week capped at. So it's capped at $150 per week. But let's say you're a first home buyer in Queensland, right? And you're looking at a 2-bedder apartment somewhere. You can now pay zero stamp duty. You can access the first home buyer's grant, and you can count up to $600 a month towards your mortgage just by renting out your spare bedroom. It also applies to refinances. So say a single parent could now count $150 per week in board paid by their adult kids. And this just increases their chance to secure a cheaper rate when they refinance.
Okay, that's great news, Ryan. Thank you so much for talking to us about this important issue. To go deeper into it, pick up a copy of the July issue of Money. Thanks so much, Ryan. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Friends with Money podcast. For credible, independent and easy to understand financial commentary, visit moneymag.com.au. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature, and further independent advice and research based on your personal circumstances should be sought before making an investment decision.